My son.
All right, if everybody wants to go ahead and grab a seat, we'll go ahead and get started here. Jody, if you want to come say a few words right away, that'd be great.
Good evening. I'm Jody Summer, the District 7 Advisory Board member. Sure, met most of you by now, so if you have any questions or anything you need relayed to these gentlemen up here, just get a hold of me. My phone number, email address is North Dakota Game and Fish website. If you'd like, I can give it to you. With that, we'd like to thank the North Dakota Bow Hunters Association. Steve was there a little bit. Oh, there he is. Okay. Steve was kind enough to reach out to me and offer to host tonight, so they're responsible for the snacks. So thank you, Steve, and thank the Bow Hunters Association. Also, we had a meeting last year in Hazen, and it went over very well. So if there's anyone from an organization, a habitat organization, wildlife, something of that nature, small communities within 80 to 100 miles of Bismarck, and you'd like to host a meeting, come and contact me. We'd love to, have a meeting in one of those communities that are outside of Bismarck. With that, I'd like to introduce Jim Williams, Director of Game and Fish. Go ahead, Jen.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jody. And
You're welcome.
good evening to everybody, and I'll echo that as well. Thank you, Steve and the Bow Hunter Association for the sponsorship tonight, or the goodies that are provided, and welcome to everybody here. This is our final night of advisory board meetings for the spring. Most of the time we do one meeting per night, but during legislative years, we did this 2 years ago as well, to where we doubled up the meetings in each night, just out of time and efficiency as far as with the legislative session, and lots going on there. So the other meeting going on tonight is up at Cavalier, and our deputy director is up there tonight for that meeting. And obviously the folks who are in the room we're here taking this shift. And that's the first thing I want to do, is make sure to have our staff have the opportunity to introduce themselves and let you guys know who they are. Mike, we'll start over here.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mike Szymanski. I'm the Migratory Game Bird Management Supervisor here in Bismarck.
Good evening, Scott Winkleman, Chief Game Warden.
Bill Haas, I'm the Assistant Chief for our Wildlife Division here in Bismarck.
Marty Eglin, Education Section Supervisor.
Greg Freeman, Communications Supervisor.
Hi, everybody. Bruce Kraft, Conservation Communications Chief.
Paul Bailey, Fisheries Biologist in Bismarck.
Ben Matikiewicz, Big Game Management Biologist here in Bismarck.
John Pilarski, Migratory Game Bird Biologist here in Bismarck.
Dan Olstead, District Wildlife Supervisor from the Riverdale office.
Kurt Francis, Private Land Supervisor.
Corey Erk, I'm the District Game Warden stationed here in Bismarck. Levi Jacobson, I'm Wildlife Management Resource Supervisor here in Bismarck.
All right, thanks everybody. And just a little bit about our advisory board members. Jody introduced himself, obviously, but one of the words and one of the things we talk about a lot is balance. We probably overuse that word, but it's a really important word when it comes to the work we do in North Dakota with fish and wildlife management and balancing the needs of private landowners. 90% privately owned in North Dakota. So, having 90% privately owned property in North Dakota and trying to manage publicly owned wildlife. That's they didn't teach you that in college, right? Those are some things that are challenging in trying to do that. And so we always try to use the word balance, and talking about again, we want to make sure that there's a lot of recreational opportunities out there, but we also need to be understanding of the impacts those resources sometimes can also have on private landowners, and how we can help to mitigate some of those things. So with our advisory board members, we have 4 that are landowners, that individuals that are farmers and ranchers, and then the other 4 members are members of a sporting organization. And so it's a really good opportunity to try to help with that balance, the balancing nature of our fish and wildlife resources in a state, again, in North Dakota, that's very dominated by private land ownership. So as Jody can attest, there's good discussions that go on in these meetings, but then also meet in the summer months just with the advisory board members, as well as December, and then 8 meetings in the fall, 8 meetings in the spring. And again, like Jody mentioned, like to rotate those around within the districts to be able to visit with different folks in different areas and hear what's going on in everybody's backyard. So as always, this has been a good round here this spring, and hearing what's going on. And so far at all the meetings, just very good discussion, good feedback, good questions, good discussion on lots of things fish and wildlife related, and the work that we're charged doing here at the Game and Fish Department. So many of you are familiar with these meetings. You know what goes on in them. The first hour we leave to all of you to discuss things that are maybe on your mind. And then the second hour, we have a list of agenda items that we like to share with you as far as things that we feel are pertinent to where you're aware of things that are going on with the department. We've got a pretty full agenda this spring, with a list of agendas. And one of the things that we've also done too is put in and we thought, and we haven't done it at all of them just because, just kind of the locations, but we did it out in Dickinson and we're going to do it here tonight in Bismarck as well. But there's been a really, really interesting elk research project that has taken place over about the last 5 years. And so kind of it's a lengthy topic and it deserves more time than we can give it here at advisory board meeting, but it's one of those that's really interesting. And so we thought we'd put some slides in tonight for that as well. So we're going to try to fit all those things in. And again, there's lots of other things we want to make sure to get to as well. But so having said that, I'll see what's on everybody's mind to start off the night with what you're hearing. I know fish are biting out on the river. So, maybe a few guys came in out of the wind tonight, but there's been some pretty good fish, being caught already out on the river. So that's pretty cool. Thoughts? Al?
What's the department's plan to deal with the reduction in federal resource agencies across the state? Just pretty much all of them are getting reduced. So how are you guys going to deal with that?
Yeah, the quick answer on that, Al, is we're not sure yet. We don't know. I mean, we've had that question a lot with, and some other area, how is that going to impact us? And, we just don't know at this point in time. Obviously the dollars that we have that we're able to match our license dollars with the federal, sport, fish and restoration dollars. Those are not impacted. But obviously other areas are. And so, one of the big concerns that's come out right away, it's been asked, I think, in pretty much every meeting, is our federal fish hatcheries. That's a big deal in North Dakota, right? I mean, North Dakota stocks as many fish as any state out there. I think we are the only state that doesn't have our own fish hatchery, and a very important aspect of what we do here from a fishery standpoint in North Dakota. And that's been a very strong partnership and relationship over the years. And obviously the benefits, the public receives those benefits. And so that makes us a little bit nervous at this point in time. There has been a few retirements, a few folks that have taken like the early retirement, and there's concern there as far as filling those, because it's not a place where they're overstaffed in the first place when it comes to help. So that's something that keeps us up at night a little bit, Al, I would say. Okay. Dwight, do you have your hand up?
North Dakota Game and Fish Department is spending $55,000 fee membership to the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, a nonprofit. I think that's a little bit high.
Well, so for a number of years, so the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies is an organization made up of membership agencies, right? It's state agencies. There are some memberships there too. Some federal agencies can also be a part of that as well. But, from a collaboration standpoint and the resources that are gained with that, it probably is a little high for, maybe what we get out of it, but we also do get a lot of collaboration, a lot of opportunities, partnerships there that are gained out of that. And so, would I like it to be less? Probably.
Do they have minutes that we can view?
The Association of Fish and Wildlife Agency?
Yeah, we're spending $55K, so we should be able to see the minutes. read the
Yeah,
minutes. I'd like to see the minutes, what's going on.
Yeah, I could get you a contact there to see if, yeah, I mean, if that's something.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Sure. What?
Yeah.
Oh, you got a list.
Yeah, well, I gotta make sure I say it right. Last fall, my brother-in-law and I were elk hunting. He had drawn for cow elk out in zone E3 and E4.
Okay.
And he'd been out several times. I was out in with him at one time. What we were finding is that there's landowner out there that owns quite a few thousand acres. And he was feeding the elk during the season to keep them on his property, I'm assuming. And there was public land to the west side of him. And so they all kind of just stay in there. I was thinking that would not be a good thing to do, but anyway, he did finally get an elk in Beach, North Dakota from somebody that says, sure, you can hunt elk. A lot of these guys out there are charging, just like some that would charge for deer hunting too, you know, because that's just the way it goes. But I was just curious. So as soon as the season was over, they stopped feeding these elk, so then they could go out on wherever they wanted to go feed. Another instance is again with the request for money to shoot an elk. I was hunting in Wyoming for a cow elk herd reduction program, and after I shot my cow elk, the Wyoming officer that was giving us the area where to go, they have a program in place where the Wyoming department paid the landowner a fee for any elk that hunter shoots. I don't know what that amount was, but that may be a program that would help for some people that don't want to pay $100 to $500 or whatever dollars it is to an individual to get an elk, especially when they're keeping them on their property, not letting them go on the public land. My brother-in-law didn't get his elk to the very last day. He hunted several weeks until he got his elk. So I didn't think it would be that difficult, but apparently it is.
Yeah, it's, you know, there's no doubt our elk numbers are growing,
Yeah.
especially out there, but it's still not an easy hunt, right? It's,
Oh, I understand that.
there's still some challenges there, and access can be, you know, one of those challenges. One of the things that was passed last legislative session that is really, we've seen some, you know, pretty good immediate results is that using a cow tag for a landowner, if they didn't get drawn for the landowner license in that year, and if they have their land enrolled in plats, or if they allow 5 or more hunters access onto their property, and they receive a cow elk license that they can use that particular year. We really saw some good results with that as far as some increased access goes.
Well, that's kind of like an offering, like what I was telling you about what Wyoming.
Yeah.
And do any of these individuals out there have a depredation fence that Game and Fish gives them animals from get eaten on their?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We have many
So
of
you
them out
think
there.
they'd want to offer some, because they're getting those free too. I
Right.
would think they would offer that rights to some people to hunt, especially cows, but
Right.
anyway.
Yeah, I mean, so the one particular landowner you're talking about, anybody that's had an elk license out there knows exactly who you're
Yeah.
talking about, and the challenges, you know,
Yeah.
with that, and the feeding, the challenges with that issue. And I mean, it's done nothing but, you know, drive, they're between neighbors and hunters and this individual. I mean, it's just a very high topic of discussion when you go out in that area. But, you know, fact is, he doesn't care. And so that's a challenge. And he owns a lot of property too. And so he controls a lot of land out there. And, but yeah, it is a challenging issue. It's one thing if he maybe owned half a section or that type of thing, but I mean, has, you know, thousands of acres of property and,
Yep.
yeah, it definitely does what it can to try to keep the elk on his land and protect them. And so
Okay,
it's challenging for sure.
got a question later when I can talk
Catch your
about
breath a little
boat
bit?
ramp.
Okay, yeah.
So,
Sounds good. Yeah.
yeah, or can I just ask that now?
Well, if you want to roll right now,
Okay.
keep going.
McLean Bottom, and that's the one that there was some slippage going on.
Yeah.
That boat ramp that's there is facing the water where the water comes by there at about 90-degree split. So I've had to myself difficulty reloading my boat in that current. And there is some riprap just to the southeast of it, big rocks, where the current isn't so bad. And I was wanting to bring up the idea that move that, not move the ramp, but build another ramp to the southeast that keeps that current from being so bad. And I know I talked to Bob Fraley last year, and he just said there was no plans to do that. But I want to bring it up again.
Yeah.
And see it.
Well, I know, so there were a lot of locations looked at down there when that ramp, of course, was out of commission.
Correct.
And, you know, now at least it's back in and it's, I wish I had a better answer for you, Floyd. It's river ramps are difficult. And, you know, Paul, you can chime in here as well, but you're either dealing with silt or strong current.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's basically what our ramp scenarios are out there. You know, you're usually having to take care of a bunch of a silt that keeps, you know, building up on the ramp, or else it can be a tricky launch with, you know, the current that's right there. But then of course you don't have the silt, you know, building up on that area too. But I know Bob looked and explored at a lot of different areas down there because it is a popular ramp. It's a good ramp that was used and people were not pleased when it was out of use. And so, I wish there was a better spot down there, but again, I think that's based on that.
Along the way south, it's difficult to find one again until you get way down to 50 miles further south.
Right.
Whichever route that is. But I just thought I'd bring that up because I know there was a guy there, I asked him I was shore fishing at the time, and I asked him what the depth was, and about 30 feet out, it was 15 feet deep, so I thought maybe it'd be shallower there than what it happened to be, but
Paul, am I missing anything there?
No, I guess you're exactly right, Jeff. With our river ramps, you got to pick your poison. Do you want silt on the ramp, or where we've got places like the Knifel boat landing, north of Bismarck a little ways. Hazelton has had major issues with siltation before, where some dredging was necessary to access it. Where boat ramps are kind of tucked out of the current, silt is a constant problem and a maintenance kind of nightmare. So if you've got to, you want to deal with
the south side that's was done a few years back, and that's got a little U that's in there. You can just come in there. Isn't that causing any issues?
Which ramp are you talking about there?
I can't tell you. It's on the Mandan side.
So Grainers?
Yeah,
or
that must be the one.
Yep. So what we've been fortunate since about 2019 is we've had pretty stable water levels. When that starts fluctuating, then a ramp that is fine at say 20,000 CFS coming down, all of a sudden can be a totally different ballgame for high current velocities, or on the flip side, a big eddy there that's going to deposit silt. So it's river ramps are definitely a big challenge, and we found that leaving them in an area with current basically helps keep that silt. So at least we get a usable ramp, but that certainly can make loading a challenge.
Yeah, but if this one that I was looking at, and I'm no engineer, but it looked like you could just move it a little to the southeast and have that rock riprap help you out a little bit, and it didn't look like it was a whole lot of buildup. I just wanted to take another look.
Sure.
There wasn't, I don't know how EPA is nowadays, but you could add some more rock riprap maybe to help it out too. I don't know.
Yeah. No, we can certainly take another look at it, but our river boat ramps, there's such a moving target because that river.
That's not bad.
That moves.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
I've wrecked my boat trailer a couple times. You don't have somebody helping you, then you're screwed as one individual trying to get your boat in. You get
Yeah, I agree.
Speaking of boat ramps, Paul, have we heard anything from the new Mandan one at all? I mean, anybody in here that's used the new ramp over there?
I did the other night. It's nice. Yeah, it's I think definitely a nice asset to have here in the Bismarck Mandan area for sure. So.
Good to hear.
Thanks, Jeff.
You bet. Thank you, Floyd.
Hey, Jeff, along with that ramp, is there any word as far as if or when they're gonna close the Merriweathers?
I have not heard any more about that. So what Steve's is talking about for anybody in the room that isn't aware. So the city of Bismarck owns that ramp, and that was the proposal that they have made as far as removing that for kind of a new development area down there. And it was, one of those things. I don't know for sure where they're at in that process.
Do you guys have any money invested in the development or maintenance of that ramp?
Very little. We looked at that. They contacted us. We'd looked at that, and there was some maintenance of it as far as I think it was silt removal actually. Because that one is a nice one as far as loading, it's out of the main current and, but it does silt in pretty good. So not a lot. Yeah. We didn't have enough money in it, to where, we'd say, hey, this, we need to get the life of this ramp out of here before somebody takes it out of there. But so no, we don't. So we didn't have a lot of say in it other than, our opinion of feeling like, hey, I mean, it's obviously nobody's probably going to be surprised when Game and Fish says that, hey, we like boat ramps, right? I mean, it's a good thing, especially along the Missouri River. So not necessarily crazy about the idea, but understanding it's not our ramp. So Travis.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking back to your that Habitat Access Summit that you guys put on this fall. And it's my personal opinion, I was really disappointed. I went into it, I guess expecting a little more. And I think the best thing I walked away with was the appetizers you guys served. I sat through the entire thing, and it was the same narrative that we've heard for the last 10 years. But I guess what I really want to touch on tonight is, it's not even hunting or fishing related. I want to discuss, North Dakota Game and Fish leadership. I think there's a culture amongst our leadership, and I think it's kind of black eye in the whole department. I deal with a lot of individuals throughout your department, a lot of good interaction. But I'll be honest with you, the interaction I've had with a couple of your top leadership has not been favorable. And it coming from you yourself, I've dealt with you, I've dealt with your chief game warden. Both experiences, I walked away very frustrated. But then I come to these meetings or I come to the summit and I see you giving ear to these groups, these special interest groups. I'm not hard on them groups, I'm just an average Joe. And I really question, Jeb, do you want to hear from everybody? I would say no. And through watching the testimony at legislature this year, I kept hearing we need to trust the experts. We can't tie Game and Fish's hands. But it seems like you guys, a true leader in my mind is willing to bring opposition to the table and have those hard conversations and find those solutions, get those opposing people together, have some discussions and see if maybe a solution that hasn't been discussed can come to light. I don't see that happening. Like I said, I sat through the entire summit. And what really struck me, and I want to bring this up, is the Good Old Boy Club. And I didn't put two and two together until legislative session. And I'm just going to touch on SB 2137. The two legislators that you chose to be on your panel, I'm going to use that word pretty loosely because there wasn't much discussion. We were being talked at and not really getting a whole lot of, to me, a town hall meeting would have engaged people a lot more, yourself up there giving answers. But you had Representative Anderson, Representative Porter, the two individuals that tried to hijack the bill. I watched all the testimony, and I was really surprised at the non-hunting community, those representatives that were non-hunters, that maybe didn't have insight as much as a lot of people in this room have. There were some real good questions. So my question is, moving forward, because the bill did pass, and there was a lot of support for it, 70%. What is the department going to do to start building relationships? With the people that aren't part of these lobbyist special interest groups, what are you going to do to start building those relationships? And I think, My question to you personally is you drive the culture. You know, when I spoke to your chief game warden 2 years ago about an issue I had with a local warden, very undesirable communication from a leader. You know, we expect more from leadership. We expect you to be the example for the people below you and how they should carry themselves. 2 years ago at a fall advisory board meeting, Dusty had spoke up and you thumbed your nose at me. As a North Dakotan, as a sportsman, I'm getting tired of you guys thumbing your nose at those who have opposition towards your narrative. That's what I'm going to call it, as narrative. Because I watched all the testimony, especially for SB 2137, a couple of other ones I pay attention to, but it was all narrative, Chip. You guys didn't bring facts from North Dakota. You know, we've been looking at this for how long? And we didn't hear facts from North Dakota. I see the same faces opposing the same bills. When is the department, you know, we hear that it's the public's wildlife, right? We hear that North Dakota is 90% privately owned. When do you as a leader start uniting those two groups so that the people that are out there that don't have land to hunt, you know, maybe I'm gonna call them the weekend warriors, that they're not being pushed out of it because they don't have anywhere to go, because landowners are tired of how the department treats us. That starts with you. That starts with your chief warden. That starts with the head of your department. Like I said, I deal with a lot of your staff on a regular basis, and they're good folks. But I feel that the entire department is being black-eyed because of poor leadership. When do you start working on the PR, the transparency, you know, maybe bring some of those people that maybe have a difference of opinion with you to the table? And I don't think 8 people on an advisory board represents the entire state. That's a real disappointing number.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, Travis. And I guess, you know, obviously you're disappointed in myself, and that's something that I need to do better on, because we represent everybody in North Dakota, and that's a challenging thing. You know, that's one of the things that I always talk about, is that no matter what we do, and no matter what we do as far as setting deer licenses, anything else, we're never going to be perfect, because there's always somebody that's going to have a little bit different of opinion on that. And so, you know, we try to base our information and on data, on research, to try to make those decisions the best biological decisions out there. Because if we're bouncing around all the time on opinions of what people want, we're constantly just going to be back and forth. And so, you know, as an agency, we rely heavily on data and information that our folks collect, and that's how we make decisions with Fish and Wildlife Management. And again, have I ever not gotten back to you on a phone call, Travis? Anytime you've called, you've gotten a call back from me.
Like I said, it's just the way it comes across. You know, like I said, I still got kind of a sore spot about how your chief game warden and a couple of calls I had about that. I didn't have a problem with the wardens. I had a problem with kind of how things were broached about the whole situation. You know, and I was on the right side of the law. I wasn't, just so everybody was clear, I wasn't in violation of no law or nothing. It was more of a private property thing. But as leadership, you know, I had good experience with Eric. Me and Eric, you know, I talked to him about it. We kind of had a chat, moved on. You know, I respect the guy for what he does. But your leadership, you know, you're an unelected position. That worries me, because you don't have an obligation, like say our local sheriff or any other elected official in the state, to answer to the people. You don't have to. You know, we have no public recourse. You know, we have no way where if you don't want to listen to us, you know, you just dismiss the opposition. We have no recourse, really. What do? We had to bring it to the legislature. You know, these lawmakers are busy. I would expect the department to be able to handle some of this stuff rather than having the citizens continually bring bills forward to control game and fish. Isn't that kind of your job, is to work with the public and to kind of work through some of those hurdles? But instead, you back a person into a corner to where we have no recourse except to draft bills. And then we take up time from our lawmakers that they should be dealing with little bigger things that affect the entire state overall, because we have a department as we heard of experts who are supposed to manage all this stuff. You know, I listened to your Game and Fish vet on one of the testimonies he gave, and he misled legislators. His testimony misled legislators, but yet then we had a private citizen misspeak, and one of your department individuals approached him, and I mean, he manned up, he redacted it, he made sure that he cleared the record. I didn't hear anything from the department to clear the water when they missed. Couldn't you give an example? Like I said, I think you guys, fisheries does a phenomenal job. We never hear a whole lot of complaints about fishery. But the big game side, you know, deer hunting is a big thing in North Dakota. I just think that you guys really need to do some more PR, some more transparency. To me, a town hall versus your habitat access summit, to where you're actually facing the people versus us being talked to.
What's this, Travis?
Well, this is that, but you get the same people. I've been attending, I don't know how many of these. It's the same people showing up in every one.
But it's advertised to everybody, right? I mean, I can't control who comes here. We go, like I said, we go out 16 times a year, and we go out to all various communities. We don't control how many people show up. We want as many people to show up as possible so we can discuss and talk about these issues. Game and Fish Department doesn't have anything to hide. I mean, we're a very open agency when it comes to, you know, whatever you want, we'll get it to you. And so, but it's a challenging job. Like I said earlier in the night when we talked about 90% privately owned property in North Dakota and trying to manage publicly owned wildlife on that property. That's tricky in a state like North Dakota where people really value private property. And so how do we do that?
And people are more apt to work with you. You know, I think the last 4 meetings I've reached out about, you know, some habitat opportunities on my own personal property. I've never heard from the department with no options.
Who did you contact?
I talked to a few of you afterwards. Talked with the Meadowlark Initiative. I think he retired, that other fellow that used to be here, but never heard from any of your departments. You know, I reached out. I got some property that I'd like to develop for habitat. You know, I see you got this information about duck declining. I got a hell of a pothole region, but you know, I'm doing it all out of my own pocket. You guys, I mean, who do you contact to get information?
So we have private lands biologists all across the state.
I've talked to Kevin.
We've talked to Kevin, so he's our private land section leader. So, you know, again, I mean, we have people that are lined up that are ready to go to people's kitchen tables to talk about what they need and what they want. So
I disagree. I've stayed after these meetings. I've talked to several of them. Never heard a peep after the meeting. I would strongly disagree. Like I said, I think instead of pointing the finger, Jeb, sometimes you gotta look in the mirror and say, what can I do better? You're a leader.
Yeah. No, I'm obviously not meeting your expectations, Travis.
I don't think I'm the only one because, like I said, you have the same ability as I do to read testimony on a lot of these bills. I'm not the only one that has the opinion I have. I wouldn't say I'm in the minority. Like I said, I went through a lot of them. I read a lot of them. I know a lot of the familiar faces, names. We have to do better. And I say we, because it's sportsmen, it's the agency, it's landowners. Instead of continually having these rifts, nobody's winning.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Pete Silvernagle, and I've had countless interactions with you and your different departments, different teams. And I would just like to say, to balance the conversation, I think you do exemplary work. Thank you. And thank you for holding these meetings. This is our chance to speak to you.
Thanks, Pete. Warren.
I got something to add and to echo your point. I've had great interactions and I don't represent a group. I don't, anybody but myself. And it was my first opportunity to get involved with the legislative session this year. And this is more of a statement, and then I have a question for you, Mike, afterwards. Senate Bill 2216, which is the Habitat Waterfowl Restoration Stamp, and House Bill 1470, which is the increase in licenses. The initial versions of both of those bills were garbage. They're bad. They weren't good for North Dakota. They affected residents much more than they affected non-residents. And I took a problem with that, and I submitted testimony. But besides just submitting testimony, I decided to reach out. I reached out to Jeb. I reached out to Casey Anderson. and had great communication from the beginning prior to any hearings happening. And I didn't have to testify really against the bills because they were fixed prior to the hearing even happening. And both bills have passed now. And I've had great experiences with it. But I do get the point, is there better communication that could happen? Sure, there might be, but these difficult conversations happen here. They don't happen on Instagram or in the Facebook comments. Nothing good happens there, right? We all can agree on that, I think. Nothing good happens on Facebook. I just wanted to make that clear. I've had good interactions with pretty much all the staff here at Game and Fish, and just would like to put that on the record. My question for you, Mike. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has put in some, it was in January, they put out some words about the pintail limit going up from 1 to 3. I just looked, Game and Fish, you guys have nothing on that, and it's still at 1 for 2025. Will that be changed, or is the department looking at changing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the pintail harvest management strategy was updated and approved this last summer. And in August, the flyways put forward the new recommended bag limit of 3 for this coming hunting season. So it will be 3. When we roll out our waterfowl news releases, we'll talk about that a little bit. One thing we're going to ask folks to do is exercise some voluntary restraint and try to shoot drakes on their own. There was a big push, during that process to actually have a sex-specific bag limit within those regulatory packages. And we couldn't see anything biologically moving the needle to have that be a burden on the hunting public when we know a lot of folks want to do that themselves. So you'll be seeing that come out later this summer when our news releases come out regarding hunting seasons.
Awesome, thank you.
Sean.
It was an easy winter, and it's probably covered in the big game update, but did you get to fly for deer or?
No.
Where at?
We didn't, which, as you well know, Sean, it's always a double-edged sword, right? If we are flying for deer, that means we have some winter on the landscape and we have enough winter to where we're actually able to fly. So we weren't able to fly. That's good with where we're at right now, deer-wise. We needed another mild winter. Hopefully we see some pretty good reproduction. Hopefully we get some rain on the landscape in a lot of these areas that really need it. And, so hopefully we see some improvements.
My concern is, we're still basing off of even 2 years ago, we had an easy winter and we did our recruitment didn't come back. Right. I think we're still feeling effects of that EHD on our breeding back, and we got to have does out there that are either sloughing or coming up open or, losing the fawns because, when you sit in the stand last winter, there was just nothing for fawns.
Yeah.
These are the does I seen. The deer numbers aren't there, but you can't look at that doe if there's not a fawn standing beside her.
Yeah.
There's not, our recruitment's just not there. And I think we still got another hiccup even with this easy winter. I think some of those does, because they probably didn't winter kill last year or the year before, we're still gonna have deer on the landscape that probably aren't producing.
Yeah, so we heard a lot from the public last year, about, again, hoping that people feeling like maybe they're going to see a little bit of a rebound, and the information didn't really show that. And so Bill's going to talk about that a little bit later, but yeah, people aren't going to be, they're not going to be happy with their draw odds for a deer license this year because they're not going up.
I'd be happy with that.
Yeah. Gary.
In regard to that first habitat access, has anything been done to plan the second one? And then have any of those recommendations been dealt with that came out of that? But what I'm hearing here with a lot of these concerns, it comes back to the same old thing. It's habitat. And it's really starting to be noticeable, especially in the eastern half of the state where there's not habitat anymore. And that could be to address what Sean just said too, they're not coming back. Well, you just don't have a lot of good habitat. It's getting a lot less. So that's my question. Excuse me, anything being done to plan a second one? However you guys would do appropriate, whether it's a town hall like this or what you did before and have the governor there. And if any of those recommendations been addressed.
Yeah, so that's a good question, Gary, and we've had several different gatherings about that, one just earlier this week on some progress of some of the suggestions that came out of there. Obviously, there were some things this legislative session that were positive, built, from the summit when it comes to some habitat and access initiatives, to where legislature was very supportive of our budget and the license fee increase, those different types of things, which obviously those dollars go right to that. But some other things, going to be some tweaks and adjustments from an access standpoint on some electronic posting things, some of the things that were brought up there as well. Some discussions on the Outdoor Heritage Fund, some additional partnerships involved with that as far as some additional habitat initiatives for the next couple of rounds. Again, many different groups kind of together, because that's what it takes. It takes several different groups and partners to be able to make those dollars go as far as we can. And then, something else that we're going to be starting to again is it used to be called the North Dakota Landowner Sportsman Council. And that's something that we're going to be starting up again in August. It's not probably going to look the same as what it was, but kind of to Travis's point a little bit, obviously I can hear his frustration, but we do need to keep talking about a lot of these issues when it comes to sportsmen, landowners. We get along a lot, right? I mean, I think in North Dakota, we do for the most part have good relationships, good partnerships, but there's always going to be those sticking points, and having an opportunity, having a place to sit down at a table and talk about some of those things is something that we're going to do. And so those are some different things that we're going to, again, continue to build on. But yeah, I mean, as a department, there's a lot of contacts with existing private landowners right now, where we're trying to get to that 1 million acres of plots on the landscape, and just continue to add to the habitat where we need to do that.
So as far as the meeting, summit, town hall, whatever, have you guys got a plan for when you're going to do that? Though, because you're right, we got to keep this going. You just can't have one and let it go for a year or two or whatever.
Right. Yeah, we haven't planned it yet, but it is we're committed to do it again. It was very popular. People received a lot of great comments, received lots of good feedback and input on it. So yeah, it's something that we definitely want to do again. And so yeah, look forward to that. We don't have the details though yet of that. So, Dwight.
Last fall, right here, we had a discussion about the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. We talked about it,
yeah.
Remember, and potentially it could bring $23 million to North Dakota Game and Fish. Well, there's no mechanism to pay for that at the federal level. It's red line spending. So the Habitat Summit was December 17th, 2024. I wasn't there. But 3 days before that, Representative Debbie Dingell from Michigan reintroduced the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. Is that a coincidence? Just 3 days before North Dakota has their Game and Fish has their Habitat Summit. I mean, did you guys know that she was going to do that? You had to know.
No, it doesn't surprise me. You would think that was a coincidence. But, but no, it was.
If that was to pass and you got $23 million of deficit spending, would you take it?
So, Recovering America's Wildlife Act didn't pass. It's not on the. As far as I'm concerned, I think it's dead.
It was for 1.4 billion.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. North Dakota's share, and that's what you'd asked me about last fall, was in the previous legislative session, the legislature put in appropriation authorization spending for us if RAWA passed. And I think it was actually 27 million, I believe, is what our appropriation was for the state. And so that was put in place into our budget if it was passed federally, but of course it never did pass federally. And now this time, I didn't even ask for it to be in our budget. I think Recovering America's Wildlife Act is dead. I don't think it's.
Okay, but if it had passed, would you take the money?
I hope so.
Yeah, why wouldn't we? I mean,
It's red line spending. You
no,
have
so Dwight, every one of our meetings, we talk about what can we do more as far as fish and wildlife resources? It comes back to habitat, right? And so anytime we can work with private landowners to put some habitat on the ground, we should be doing that.
I know, it sounds good, we're all for habitat and whatnot, but you can't borrow the money at the federal level. I mean,
Dwight, that's why it's not passing. The negotiations were to have a pay for that dollars. We were talking about crypto, we were talking about offshore.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there's a lot of things that happen congressionally, right? That if Congress passes something and they want, they authorize, they pass something, they want somebody to utilize that, right? Obviously, there's our congressional delegation that felt like this is a good thing for the public. And so I would probably feel the other way. I mean, if we didn't utilize that, my guess is my phone would be ringing saying, why are you not? It wouldn't be ringing from you, Dwight, on that. I get that.
Dwight, would you rather have us spend it or have it be reallocated to another state and have them spend it instead?
no, North Dakota Game and Fish, every meeting in front of the legislature, you guys like to say, we do not deficit spend. And that's good. That's a great thing.
Yeah.
But at the federal level, it's out of control. And this is just conservation, it's transportation, everybody. It's USAID, it's everybody.
Sure. But it's not the North Dakota Game and Fish Department's responsibility to control federal deficit spending, right?
But we're a member of the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, is a NGO, but the money comes, every state game and fish department, 5K. It comes from the sportsmen and whatnot, so it's not an NGO, it's a GEO, it's a government organization. And they're the ones that are promoting and pushing for the Recovery of America's Wildlife Act.
Yeah, well, they're certainly
they're
certainly one of the groups. Yeah, I mean, but that discussion though Dwight, started back in 2012, 2013 with the blue ribbon panel that was put together from big agriculture groups, energy groups, to try to get ahead of all the threatened endangered species listing, right? How can we get ahead of that to try to help producers, to try to help energy companies so they don't have to deal with all these hurdles of all the listing of, the loss of grasslands, which again leads to lots of loss of species that are grassland dependent. And so that's where the whole conversation came from.
Well, that doesn't fit Dwight's narrative, damn it.
Other thoughts, other questions? Al?
Can you give us an update on the bird flu this winter up at the dam and whether it impacted other species like bald eagles?
Yeah, Mike, obviously we had a lot of dark geese impacted this year, which has not been the case in previous years. But Mike, I don't know if you have kind of an update on some of that or?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have an exact estimate on how many birds were killed by that outbreak. It was a pretty interesting situation with Lake Sakakawea being open basically through December and then freezing up right at the end of January. So we had a lot of birds just out, not exposed, not communicated, and they all got jammed into the tail race right at the beginning of cold weather season. And it was just super bad timing and unfortunate. We assume that a few thousand birds died from that. We're not concerned about population level impacts. Yes, it's a lot of birds, but it's not enough in the grand scheme of the population to really move the needle. Those birds in the tail race that were affected come primarily from Northwest North Dakota, mostly from Saskatchewan though. So it's not like a part of our breeding population that we count in North Dakota. We didn't hear much about other species being involved though. We know that ducks have a pretty high resistance to it. It seems like it's mostly geese that get affected during inclement weather events, where some of the birds that are probably weaker overall perish. Raptors previously had been involved in mortality events quite a bit. We think they probably had a bit of immunity built up from exposure over time to the disease.
I reported 3 dead bald eagles Sunday within 400 yards of each other down in the downstream campground.
Just now, yeah. Yeah, bald eagles are migrating right now, so
Yes,
they're under a lot of stress. This is the time of year, during migration, both spring and fall, we have a lot of mortality events. I always call it the great filter. It's where we have most of our natural mortality, with the exception of nesting hens during the summertime. You did report them though to
I
our.
reported in the Kyler Johnson, sent him GPS coordinates on them, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for doing that. Yes, sir.
See, I was reading on this, where you guys are getting a lot of negative comments on the non-resident waterfall and how.
Can you speak up a little bit, Gary?
I was reading where you guys have got a lot of negative comments from the public relating to non-resident waterfall hunting numbers and that. Are you guys looking at doing anything to address that? Maybe Mike can talk about this, but wasn't there something several years ago called the hunter pressure concept? Get the name of the man that had come up with that, but it seemed like a very good idea. Are you guys gonna look at doing anything like that to address, so you get more to the quality of hunting versus quantity, getting some non-residents here? What I'm saying? Are you gonna look at that and do anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, we're always kind of looking at the situation. The hunter pressure concept, that exact thing is probably not going to come back. Just the way it was drawn up, we've got better ways of addressing it nowadays. And the truth is, from a resident hunter standpoint, it would absolutely not give you what you think it would, because our numbers of resident hunters have declined so much. We would actually, most years, we're actually, even though we have increasing numbers of non-resident hunters, non-resident waterfowl hunters, we would still, under that model, have more non-resident waterfowl hunters. We're falling usually way short of what that model would call for in non-resident waterfowl hunters. So I don't think we'd ever go back to that methodology. We have other ways of addressing it that, we're looking at solutions all the time. We hear from the public, both residents and non-residents, that are concerned about accessibility. Competition is usually the biggest factor. The world's just kind of closing in on everybody, and it's getting to be a pretty competitive landscape.
Have you ever thought of doing anything like what South Dakota does, where you have to be, as a non-resident, you have to get drawn, go waterfowl hunting? Have you ever looked into something like that, Mike?
It certainly comes up, yeah.
Am I correct in thinking that a lot of what he's talking about, though, would have to be done legislatively? Like, you guys couldn't just start doing that, or am I mistaken on that?
There's some things we have the ability proclamation do, then there's other things that we would need, legislation on as well. But, obviously there's been a fair amount of that talk over the last couple of years anyway, to looking at some of the pressure from non-residents and, how that can be adjusted a little bit. But many of you were in the room last year when we had this discussion. I pointed out then, I'll point out now, is that there's also another side to there's also other opinions on this issue. Surprise, surprise, right? It's one of those things that you hear fairly often from people, especially in smaller communities, that they like the non-residents that come to their communities and fill up their bars and their restaurants and hotels. And so it's there's another side of that discussion. And so it's not just certainly not us having the only say when it comes to what would happen, with non-resident waterfowl hunters. So, but Warren.
I think to add to your point, Brock, with this 1470 that's passed both chambers, has it been signed yet?
Yeah.
It did? Okay, perfect. Their non-residents are only now allowed to hunt in one zone, if I'm not mistaken. So kind of a two-part question. One, does that not negatively affect zone 1 and zone 2 as it currently reads, those small communities? Because most of non-resident hunters are probably going to choose zone 3. And then to that point, will the department change those zones with the governor's proclamation for the 2025-2026 hunting season?
That's probably the more realistic option right there, is it with the elimination of a statewide license and the existing zones that are in place. I think everybody probably feels that those zones could probably be better, aligned. And then again, the conversation, comes up from some groups and it won't from other groups, but caps within those zones, different types of things. But again, I think for the immediate process anyways, maybe looking at some zones to have some zones that make a little more sense than what's in place right now without any caps, see where people are flowing to, see where they're going, and then over time, if there needs to be some adjustments that are made, so be it. But I think, having to get some of that data and information first before you make some of those decisions, but that's just my thought. So, Sean.
Yeah, I would like to see something done on the borders because, that western edge of zone 2 is a mile from my house. We got property on both sides of that and I got hunting buddies from out of state that come and, that severely limits us.
Sure.
That zone 2 banded or moved or something, or let somebody else have it for a while. I mean, we've had it forever right there.
Yeah.
It divides Turtle Lake.
So,
yeah, anytime you draw a line anywhere, right?
That's gonna be something, but.
Wrong side of
Three. 80 feet. I mean, he's got Skakawee on one side.
that's just it. Anytime you try drawing zone boundaries, someone's cut off by something somewhere. And, what we're looking to do is primarily try to have them be large enough so that we can have biological information within those zones. That's kind of the thing. You don't want your zones to be too small because you can't get enough information. If they're too big, they don't tell you anything, like zone 3 is currently. So trying to have zones that are a little bit bigger, a little more equal in size, and then also line up with some of our biological information that we collect on our department surveys.
Hey, Mike, when I mentioned being drawn for waterfowl like South Dakota, what kind of feedback have you got, or when you've had those discussions? Just be curious about that. How has that been received, or haven't you talked about it that much?
One thing that strikes me about that type of process is it really depends on how successful you might be drawing. Like when people draw for South Dakota, they generally have a pretty good chance of drawing. When people draw for Manitoba, they have a really good chance of drawing. So if you put a system like that in place and everybody's got a 90% chance of getting their thing, they don't worry about it too much. But if you have to put in by the 1st of June or the 1st of May every year, way in advance when you're not thinking about it, still don't have a very high chance of drawing, or even if it's 70% or 60%, a fair bit of uncertainty, it causes a lot of problems for people trying to plan, and it gets pretty messy. So, I'm not saying we wouldn't try to do something that restricts when you need to restrict, but that's sort of where it hits the wall on getting messy.
Marty, I can't let you stay quiet back there. How's the coon hunting?
Not as good as the cottontail hunting, but, I'm never complaining.
All right.
Hey, Jeff. I got a couple comments. Just, where are you guys at on the Garrison diversion project since they're revamping that? You guys know about the project at Garrison diversion?
Can you be a little more specific?
Well, right now they're going to be completing the Garrison diversion, right? That's in the talks, it's in the works. They're planning on right now, in development stages of that. Connecting it over to the red and Dakota, right? You guys are aware of that project?
Well, I mean, obviously there's,
I mean, right now it's like in the construction or the development phase of it.
Right, I mean, as far as piping water over.
We're talking the canal.
Yeah, I mean, piping water over from the Missouri River over to the east part of the state, yes.
Yep. Is that gonna affect anything down the road with Audubon or the chain lakes or anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of, yeah.
Okay, next topic, China. When they drain that in 27, obviously about 10% of the lake's gonna be left, right? The plan is most fish are gonna go out the glory hole, right?
There's certainly gonna be a pretty significant loss of fish and then not a lot of area for the fish to remain, correct?
So my question on this is, they've implemented this in Minnesota quite a bit of times. Obviously, you know why I come here. I'm the only one that supports bow fishing, right? So in Minnesota, what they do is when they do these lakes, they open a season up the year that they're draining, right? And they open it up to all legal take method of any fish in that lake. So I was just throwing it out there as a suggestion. Obviously, like I said, we appreciated the catfish we got last year on the river. We had very good feedback on that.
this winter, we had great feedback on northern pike take through the dark household. We had a couple people that attempted that and were very successful at it. So they greatly appreciated the opportunity for advancing the same sport, right? Another topic is South Dakota, Montana. Now, at the end of the season, after salmon spawn, they've opened up 2-week seasons in both states on the Missouri system. After fish spawn out, they allow 2 weeks to go after salmon. So this is just more stuff like states around us do this stuff. And obviously it was great that we got it opened up a little bit more on the Missouri, not really asking for the rest of the state, but it was just a way to manage a lot of fish that were going to die anyways. So just future things that, like I said, just looking at, if you want to talk afterwards or whatever else.
I would like to talk more. I think that's an interesting idea on the Chita aspect of it.
You know, like I said, most of the fish are going to die. We have some of the, like I said, nobody in here cares about non-game fish. I care about native non-game fish, right? But Chita holds the biggest buffalo in the state. The state records come out every year. A lot of times they come off my boat with other people on it. So like I said, it's just fun to take people out there, but obviously we're going to lose a lot of stuff. I said it'd be interesting to see if we could just discuss maybe a 1-year season as they're draining it in 27. Minnesota does it, other states do it. So that way we don't have a loss of fish where maybe we have a chance at them with different take methods, spearing or bow fishing, stuff like that.
Oh, interesting. Let's talk offline more afterwards or later and about that. I think that's an interesting concept.
And I had one question from somebody at Minot. They were just wondering about stocking of pure muskies this year. Are you guys stocking muskies this year or tiger muskies?
Paul?
Off the top of my head, not in any of my district, I know, so I'm not sure where we're at with Audubon, Ashtabula, the Canal Lakes, off the top of my head.
Anybody interested? The walleyes are up in the shallows on chain lakes right now. They're big.
I'm sure some are interested, yeah. Sean?
We're asking questions for other people. The principal there in Turtle Lake asked me if I could ask why we can't ice fish on Lightning Lake. We know it's because of the trout. Some guy comes up once a year and fly fishes there that none of us have ever seen. Why can't we ice fish on Lightning Lake? Especially a kid's thing or a kid's tournament or something. I mean, we have that lake there that no one ever fishes.
Suppose Lightning's not yours either, huh?
No, sorry.
We just threw in, I don't know, 1,000 or whatever trout again, and it's, why can't we ice fish on it? I mean, if somebody could get back to me on that or a good answer.
We will.
It's been a lot of years.
Yeah. Get back to you on that, Sean. Yep. One more, Travis.
How come we can't use blinds in the spring? So I called and I asked why, because I didn't see it in the proclamation anywhere. But in the fall, we can set our blinds up from this time, have them down at this time on public land. She told me that you can only use blinds per day use in the spring. And I'm talking about spring turkey mainly. I was told we can't use them unless you put them up, you're occupying them, and if you take them back down when you leave.
Just trying to think on that. Levi, Bill.
Yeah,
it goes along with our admin rules, right, as far as the dates.
Right. That's what we have in our, but that's something that we could consider. I mean,
because they go out, set a blind up, and then have to take it back down every day. It's cumbersome, especially in the dark every day. It'd be nice to be able to utilize public lands like we do in the fall. It seems to work in the fall just fine. I'm assuming that's geared more towards deer hunters.
Right.
In the spring, as much game available in spring turkey.
Yeah, there's no doubt that it originated with tree stands, right? Just because tree stands are a little more challenging to put up and down each and every day versus blinds or not. And then too, I think it's probably just one of those things we don't see very often, just simply because they're probably not real comfortable leaving blinds out, or else they disappear sometimes too. So, but again, that would have to be changed or included administratively and in our administrative rules. And that's probably something that we could look at and discuss anyway. Again, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move to hour 2 here. We've got, like I said, kind of a full agenda of different stuff, and I'm just going to hit it off right away. I'm going to talk some legislation just to recap. I know many of you in the room have kept up on legislation this year. There's a lot going on. It was a very manageable session for the department. I think at the beginning, there were approximately 20 bills that we were monitoring, and then at crossover, it was, down to pretty much half of that. And so it was a very manageable session, overall a good session, when it comes to department legislation. And so I'll just kind of pick, I guess, a handful of them. And then if there's any other ones that anybody wants to visit about, by all means, we can certainly do so. I'll start it off with, touched on this one a little bit earlier, our budget bill. And again, as a reminder, the department's a little bit different conversation for us as an agency compared to other agencies that are actually up there asking for general fund dollars. We're up there just seeking the authorization appropriation to be able to spend game and fish dollars. And so that's always a little bit easier conversation, especially a session like this where property tax is the theme and just lots of discussion around general fund agencies and those budgets compared to ours where it's a special fund budget. So, overall, again, I think this is the first time in many sessions that our budget bill didn't even go to a conference committee. It was, very minorly adjusted in the House side. The Senate added back in some dollars for some seasonal employees and things that the House took out. It was sent back to the House side and they said, no, we're good with that. So it was passed. And so some initiatives, again, that we're continuing on from the previous couple sessions are habitat and access. And, those are some continued goals that, an additional 5 million, put into the budget for those specific goals, in mind. And so, that continues to be our focus as an agency as far as trying to get additional access, but most importantly, additional habitat on the landscape. Something I think is good to mention, this was a kind of a community effort of many people that were involved, maybe on kind of the outside with input, but then also a group that was formed, put together to talk about non-resident archery mule deer hunting. Lots of concern over the years on, what the Badlands is looking like as far as with, too many hunters, whether that's residents, whether that's non-residents. Did a lot of different things within that group, sent out some survey information to the public to get some feedback. One of the things that really came out strong on that was that the way that the legislature mandated the department issue non-resident any licenses to non-residents based on the previous year population. Not the population, the previous year gun licenses, 15% of the previous year. So that it doesn't really align when you have tough winters, and it just seems out of whack a little bit when you're maybe dealing with lower population out there, but the previous year maybe was still pretty high, so people are seeing a lot of non-resident hunters. And so one minor change to that piece of legislation, and that is now that it is based on on the existing year mule deer numbers, not the previous year. So our guys every spring are out there doing mule deer surveys, make recommendations in our proclamation for our deer numbers. Once that gets approved by the governor, then that lottery can be held then for non-residents. So with the way our lottery system is now, it can speed things along very quick. That is the reason that was in place, is because a number of years ago, there was some concern from guides and outfitters that when those non-residents were finding out that they drew the license, it was maybe towards the end of July. It didn't really provide enough time for plans, and so that's why it was determined that way. And so then the lottery could be held earlier in the spring. Now we can get those numbers, hold the lottery, and people are going to be knowing early on in the summertime. So that's something that I think everybody felt like made a lot of sense, legislators included. Hunting license fee increases. This was something that we had have had a lot of discussion about, input on. One of the legislators who is on our budget committee understands that there's one piece of legislation that mandates the department to maintain at a minimum $15 million in our reserve fund. to be able to account for tough winters, different situations that are out there. Maybe Lake Skakawee is all of a sudden really low. We're putting in a bunch of boat ramps, helping with those types of things. They want us to have some type of cushion in there and so he was noticing that, our projections, probably out towards the end of next biennium would potentially put us below that 15 million. And so he introduced a bill that would, again, and like Warren said, had to make some adjustments to it. There were some things in there that needed some adjusting, and I think people worked together, and anybody who was interested in that discussion, we brought them in and we had it. And, I thought it was good, productive conversation. So you will be seeing come August 1st, some increase in license fees. I believe they're fairly modest, again, but I don't take that lightly. I realize that some people probably won't. I know there's some people on fixed incomes, those different types of things, but I still think that when you can buy a combination license in North Dakota for $60, which is an increase of $8, and that you can use that license literally every day of the year, that's still a pretty good bargain, I think. I think that's still a pretty good deal. So 2137, obviously that one is, one that, folks have talked about a lot. And so the department no longer has the ability to restrict the practice of hunting over bait. And so it's on hold for 4 years. Sunset clause was put in there to where 4 years from now, that'll come off. But, we, at this point in time, the department will be monitoring for CWD like we have, but we won't be able to put that restriction in place like we have in those units where CWD has been detected. Daryl.
Just to be certain that you still can restrict baiting on North Dakota Game and Fish land.
Correct. That's just private land. Yes, it's private land. That's correct. Yep. We talked about the waterfall habitat restoration stamp a little bit. I can't remember who brought that one up. Again, a group that's concerned about waterfall hunting, the future of waterfall hunting in North Dakota, wants to take some dollars in a kind of a special fund to put towards some waterfall projects, whether it's youth hunting, whether it's access, whether it's habitat, but then also be able to have better, clean data when it comes to who is truly a waterfall hunter in North Dakota. That's something that we don't have. We have good feeling on that because Mike's awful good at data mining when it comes to, getting the information out of surveys, but we don't have a specific waterfall license in North Dakota. But this will be that. This will be just like a crane stamp. This will be a waterfall stamp to where you have to buy it for $5, but then we clearly know who intended to at least hunt that particular year.
Yeah, if I can add on that just real quickly too, the question we always get is right away, how many non-resident waterfowl licenses were sold and how many resident waterfowl licenses were sold. And we don't sell currently a waterfowl license for residents. Usually that's coming up right into legislative periods. People want to know pertaining to that hunting season. We don't have estimates of active resident waterfowl hunters until about May the following hunting season, because we have to go through our whole small game survey process, accumulate that data, and then analyze. So it's a big help in getting that question answered in a timely manner for folks. And it also help create some efficiencies for us on our harvest survey side, maybe save a little money.
Couple more. Another really good change I think that was made deals with youth hunting when it comes to the antlerless license. Previously, the 11 and 12 and 13-year-old was just for whitetail only, antlerless whitetail only. It now gives the department flexibility to include that for mule deer as well. And so here's what we're thinking on this, and we'd really like your guys' feedback on this. Obviously, there are some units where we don't manage mule deer, we have any licenses, those types of things. And so again, we don't have a concern in there. But due to the recent concerns about Badlands pressure and just the sensitivity in general of mule deer in the Badlands, there is a little bit of concern there with that. And so what the department is looking at doing is treating this opportunity for a mule deer doe license for 11, 12, or 13-year-old, just like we do a 14 and 15-year-old license, where there's a certain number of them, and individuals will have to apply for that license. And so it's, it'll be 10% of the gun licenses. And then, those youth licenses will be available for that. So it'll be a set amount that's out there. And, that way we can, still have control over our mule deer harvest, and, people don't feel like everybody is rushing out to the Badlands for a mule deer doe hunt. And then, mom or dad are out there for an archery hunt all week long type thing. And again, we don't know how many people might do that, but there's, 4,500 potential opportunities that might do that as far as the number of, youth licenses go. And so it's something that we want to pay attention to. Brock.
I think it'd be really nice for that too, if you let, and I don't know how you guys would do it, but if Western landowners, so if you're a rancher out in Western North Dakota and you don't have that many whitetail at all nearby, I think it'd be really nice for their kids to be able to get priority in that tag. Or, again, I don't know how it would work, but to me, it wouldn't make sense if you live in Grassy Butte and you got a 12-year-old and you got to apply for a mule deer doe tag and you don't get drawn. So then you got to go elsewhere to look for a whitetail tag. Seems to me that maybe it would be easier to give them some opportunity right there close to home. I mean, heck, I'd imagine most of them guys wouldn't even need to leave their own property to shoot a doe, so they're not going to compete that much with the public hunting going on, and it's easier for them too.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. One of the things that we talked about with that is that so again, it'll be like the 14 and 15-year-old, to where if somebody applies for that and receives that, they have to stay in that unit. So I think that's going to help what you're talking about. I don't think that, maybe somebody from Fargo or Grand Forks is, knowing that. I think that's going to deter maybe a lot of, people from going and doing that potentially, if they know they have to stay in that unit the entire time. And so this one might take a few years to get right. I mean, I think we're open to it, right? Because I agree with you. It's one of those things we want to protect, obviously, the Badlands out there and the mule deer population. But we think there's some opportunity to be had, especially for some kids out there that don't have a lot of whitetail opportunity with or without EHD, really. So, Sean.
What's the total number, I guess, those 11, 12s and 13s on just the whitetail side?
It's like 4,500, right?
Yeah, about 4,000. There's about over 6,000 youth hunters, so that's a pretty substantial number.
So I was just wondering if we're looking at overhauling this, and I've had this discussion with many other people. None of us started until we were 14, and I love the youth hunting, and I'll tell you, if you start talking about doing something change, you're the bad guy in the room. But can we make it a sliding scale to where when there's less than 50,000 tags, maybe the 11-year-olds can't get it, and when there's less than, 70,000 tags, you got, the 12, maybe I got that backwards, when you're down to 50,000, maybe the 11s and 12s or 13s can't get them, but when you're under 70 and under 80, and we got over 100,000 tags, hell, let's let them shoot all they want. But right now, and my kids did it, I've seen other kids, we give them a tag, that guaranteed doe tag at 11, 12, and 13, and then they get their 14, and they don't get another tag till they're 21 and they're way in college. We don't have the population to keep the recruitment, really. I don't know that we're gaining them, giving them a doe tag, and then they go into that 4-year cycle like the rest of us, where we don't get a tag for 4 years. You gotta do something with the population to bring that back. I mean, that's what it.
Or an idea could be, if we're below 50,000 tags, it's for guys 50 and older that don't get a license.
Yeah. Stop the season. Stop the season 1 year would do amazing things for us.
Yeah, I
just didn't look at it. Yeah.
And this one, the youth one is, and we have looked at, so the numbers, and we are able to see where people like for the whitetail, for example, we're able to see across the state where this harvest is happening. And again, I think it is fairly spread out, or at least it has been over the years, to where it probably isn't, super meaningful as far as those go. But at some point in time, again, like Bill said, the numbers out there are high enough, but that's where I think with this one anyway, we're definitely wanting to take a cautious approach with the mule deer out in the Badlands with.
And we talk about youth hunting, but I'd like to see talk about the 16, 17, 18-year-olds. Let's look at them, because I think we are truly removing an opportunity for them. Yeah, some get them, but not everybody. There are many kids that skip that whole high school year, them years that don't get a tag.
Yeah.
If they go into the point pool.
Right.
And to me, that's where we're losing them, the kids that can't come back from college now all of a sudden to come hunt because they got other things going on, so.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know that we need to be shooting them at 11,
Yeah,
12, 13. If the deer numbers support it, I'll let them shoot them at 8, 9, I don't care. But the deer numbers don't support it, at least not in 2K1.
Oh, fair point. There's some another.
Oh, yeah, just to clarify on so you're talking just mule deer in the Badlands, so like Oliver County, where this new license is gonna be for youth hunters, they will be able to hunt either one.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
That's good.
Yep. It'll be our managed Badlands units where we give specific mule deer licenses.
Perfect.
The last piece of legislation I'll talk about is Senate Bill 2155, and that deals with antelope gratis licenses. And so, that one got a little bit of conversation and discussion, and just to put a little bit of discussion on that. So how the gratis process currently works for antelope is landowners are guaranteed the first 50 licenses and then the remaining 50%. So from an easy math standpoint, if the department issues 100 licenses, landowners could receive 75 out of those 100. And there was a bill introduced that would cut that half and half. And so that passed, and I believe it has been signed by the governor. And one of the things I think to kind of point out with this is that, and gratis bills are difficult for the department, obviously. I mean, we provided information. We didn't get involved as far as, supporting or against. Again, it's one of those things that, like we talked about earlier, 90% privately owned land in North Dakota. But this one, where the department provided some information, was that we're always a little hesitant to provide just an opportunity for one particular group. We get questions a lot about, well, just open it up for bow hunters or just open it up for muzzleloader hunters. Well, we've had some experience in the past where we've tried that and it doesn't go over real well. I think anytime we have a season, there's an expectation that there's going to be an opportunity out there for a lot of people, for everybody. And one of the advantages of this bill would be that the department, say if we felt like there was some opportunity for 30 licenses to be out there, is that now then there would be 15 that would go to landowners, 15 that would go to hunters. Whereas previously right now, if we had that season, all 30 of those would, generally speaking, would end up going to landowners. And so it's, as long as we can issue enough licenses when it comes to antelope, this probably isn't going to change very much for landowners at all. I think the most, so for example, this past year, out of our 13 units, there were 5 units that had a lottery for landowners for their gratis the way it was. When I looked at it, I think if you looked at the 50-50 split that will take place now, it would have added 2 more units to that. But if there's an increase of licenses and just a little bit of licenses, then it pretty much guarantees all landowners are going to receive that license. And so, that's one of the things that we'll have to wait and see how that happens. But this also gave the opportunity for landowners to, if they do not receive their gratis license, then they can also go in the general lottery and try to draw one out of that. So, we'll see how it goes. But that was another bill that had some discussion in it for sure. So, any thoughts on any other piece of legislation that anybody wants to hit on or touch on? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Bill.
Okay, to game one?
Yeah.
Or you want probably get on the waterfowl?
You want to touch on that?
I could touch on that just a little bit quick. So there's a handout in the back. Gives a little bit more information. Mike already talked quite a bit, just about non-resident waterfowl. But this gives just a little more information if you're interested. And we have heard a lot from folks that there's a lot of pressure from non-resident waterfowl hunters, and it's true. Last year we had over 28,000 non-resident waterfowl licenses that we sold, and And we estimated we had a little over 16,000 residents. So non-residents have been increasing overall, but our residents have been decreasing. And so now we've got to a point where there is a pretty big difference in number of residents versus non-residents that are participating. And so again, as these guys started to hit on just with the zones, right now we have these zones, they've been in place for over 20 years. They just don't serve the purpose, as a lot of you guys had commented, a lot of different reasons. So we're kind of looking at maybe buying up into about 6 units that would be relatively equal size. A lot of that has to be determined yet, but yeah, I don't know, Mike, if there's any more on that. Yeah.
No, and with those zone boundaries, we'd be striving to use really identifiable roadways, not things like county lines or gravel roads, things like that. They'd be plainly identifiable by the public. The only exception might be something up on like Dakota. It's a huge lake where we don't expect anybody to have a boundary issue. But yeah, pretty big zones, pretty equal size across the state. They'll vary a little bit, but should have enough room for folks.
Yeah, and this year, our thought is it's going to be some information gain. That we're going to find out where these hunters are selecting for units. We know that there's time periods where it's very congested. That late October, a lot of people coming from Minnesota and other states, and it does get pretty busy. So we'll have a lot of information, and in the future, if there is a need to put caps or other means on, then explore that. So one other thing on the backside, there's been a lot of talk from a lot of you about loss of habitat. It is nice to hear that from all of you, recognizing that there just needs to be more. We have been making that a top priority, but we're talking about deer and pheasants and other species, but habitat is really important for ducks. We're the duck factory, right? And it takes grass to produce ducks. And when we have more than 2.5 million acres less of idle grass on the landscape, that's a big difference. And so our duck population is a bit on the decline, and we've been really lucky in recent years to have a liberal season, very long season, high bag limits. Maybe Mike can just speak quickly to where we're sitting. We're fine right now, but we're not so far off from changes.
Yeah, overall continental duck populations are declining. We're seeing that mirrored in our state waterfowl estimates and our state duck breeding population. There's a graph of the North Dakota fall flight on the back. That fall flight is a component that's built by both the breeding ducks and the ducks that are produced. So it's our May duck survey and our July brood survey that produces that fall flight index. And you can see it creeping down over time with lower highs and lower lows. And it's going to keep going down if something serious doesn't change on our landscape in North Dakota to provide more upland nesting habitat. We're still waiting to see, where we go with federal frameworks. Those are dictated by a larger federal and Canadian partnered survey, primarily looking at mallard indices and pond counts. We'd have to be below probably about 5 million mallards and 5 million ponds counted on that survey to go into a more restrictive package overall. Last year, we were a fair bit over 5 million ponds and at about 6.5 million mallards in the breeding population. If we do go into a restricted package, the moderate package is, it goes liberal, moderate, restrictive. Moderate package is a very hard target to hit. It doesn't really do much. It reduces the bag limit a little bit. We go into a restrictive package, we get cut down to 30 days or 39 days in the central flyway and an overall duck bag limit of 3. So that would have consequences for sure. It gets a little harder to place a season and we lose our week-long framework extension on the front end. So we'd have to open a week later, the Saturday nearest October 1st. And it's important to remember too, we talk about duck nesting habitat. Those same habitats are very important for deer and pheasants as well.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions on waterfowl before I jump into the big game? Okay, real quickly, we had a lot of other talks, but we did some really cool research on elk in the western part of the state. We wanted to give you guys a few slides to to just kind of show you what this involved. And so the area that we researched, this would be Dickinson right here. This is the Montana border. And so just our whole Badlands area out west is the area that we did the research. Captured elk and put collars on them. And these were the captured locations. Again, same area they're shown in that other map, beach here, Dickinson, Lakes Kakawea, Watford City up here. So this whole area, the Badlands, is where we put the collars on. We put collars on 97 cows, 8 yearlings, yearling cows, 6 adult bulls, and 38 yearling bulls. So with those elk, it gave us over 1 million locations that we were able to learn a lot of information about what those elk do, their travel corridors. And this really shows that what we have is 9 distinct herds is what we've found. Those satellite bulls or those young bulls are often the ones that are moving from herd to herd. But by and large, they stay within these areas. And so again, here's the interstate right here. This is the south unit of the park, just for reference. So we do have elk that have some movements, but not migratory, like some of the western states. So we didn't have like a migration that took place or anything like that. But there were some really unique movements. This was a young male that went from North Dakota. Then he went over into Montana here. This is the state line. And then he stayed there. And he stayed there until his collar was no longer working. And then he was harvested in Montana when he was a 5-year-old. So he may have come back and forth. We don't know all the information, but he probably dispersed over there and then found a nice home until he was harvested as a 5-year-old bull. This young bull here, he went on a lot bigger trek. It was over 500 miles when it was all said and done. And so he was captured, or we put a collar on him up east of Watford City on the reservation. And he went on a trek, and he went south, and then he went east all the way across the Missouri River. So he didn't like anything over there, came back west by Hazen, all the way south into Standing Rock Reservation down here into South Dakota. Hung out there for a while, and then decided to shoot all the way west, and then he got into the Slim Buttes. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, South Dakota, those pines, if you're heading down to Rapid City. And he stayed in a really small area and stayed there until his collar didn't work anymore, and then eventually it fell off. And so we didn't have any more information on where he was harvested, but pretty crazy movements these elk can make, especially these young bulls. So one thing that we did learn for sure, and we hear about this from landowners, that our elk population is doing really, really well. We're maybe in that balance to where we're pushing too many elk. We're pushing the tolerance of those private landowners. It's so you could see here, this is the preference. So this here is public land, this is private land, and then this is reservation. So early fall, late fall, that's when we're hunting them. They're selecting the private land. A lot of that obviously has to do with pressure. Elk are really smart and really avoid the pressure. So they're going to find that refuge. And oftentimes that's on that private land. And so that's also contributes to some of the other concerns that we hear from the private landowners. This is crop, grassland, other cover, shrub, and woodland. So of course, just like our mule deer, the elk are in those wooded areas, but they're also really heavy into the crop, and that's something we hear about often as well, and especially in the fall before heading into winter. Oops. Okay, so elk survival. For the most part, the only way elk are dying in the West is being harvested by a hunter. They do pretty well. So of the 27 mortalities that we had on the elk that we had collared, 22 were through illegal harvest, and that was 16 females, 6 male elk. 2 were wounded and then died from their wounds. That was 1 female, 1 male. So that's 24 of the 27 elk were harvested essentially by hunters. So the other 3 was a probable EHD, one malnourished and had just a tongue abscess, and then the other one we weren't sure what was the cause of death. And so really what's happening for the most part is our license allocations really dictate, that population. And shouldn't even say the license allocation. It's a license allocation and then the harvest success. So our annual survival, as you can see, for all elk as a whole is 88%. That's pretty high. 80% for bulls, 90% for cows, and then kind of a breakdown by year for how that survival looked. And so one of the other aspects of that study was just how we monitor them. We monitor them on an annual basis, and we have these census areas. So same exact area on the map, Dickinson here, the park here, and then each of these is those distinct herds. And so as you can see, the lines go north and south. That's how we fly each of these areas. Straight line, 1 mile apart, straight north and south. It helps us a lot with being able to see those elk. We're not flying into the sun. So that it definitely, so some of our procedures were refined by this study, and this really helps us to have good data. So as we look at how the elk have done, this is 2014 all the way to 2023. Through those years of 14 through 19, we issued anywhere from 90 to 170 antlerless elk licenses per year. We realized our elk numbers are getting higher, going up at a rate of 13% a year. So we began to issue more licenses, 210 antlerless licenses a year, and that was enough to kind of cap off that growth. So we're fairly stable, roughly a 2% increase. This last year we were really aggressive and had a pretty good harvest, and so seemed to level off, and we increased a little bit because we want to maybe get to where we get a little bit more harvest and drop that population just a little bit more. But our hunters have still been very successful, but as we had mentioned, a cow elk license can be one of the most difficult licenses to fill. People get fooled when they put in and like, I'm just going to go shoot a cow in somebody's ranch and that'll be easy. And that's just not the reality. It's a hunt. It takes a lot of days to harvest a cow elk, that's for sure. And I didn't really talk about it because I just want to hit real quick on our study, but our elk are also doing really good in the gorge and Turtle Mountains. So any quick questions on that? I'm going to hit on mule deer real quick. We fly in the spring and we fly in the fall. In the fall, what we're really looking at is our fawn production and how that is in relation to our does. And then also our buck to doe ratio is something that we're really focusing on in the spring. When we fly that, we're really looking at the population abundance, how those deer came through the winter, what we had for our population increase. So number of mule deer per square mile. So these ones, this is the Badlands units. So 4B, 4A, 4C, D, E, and F. That's our traditional area for mule deer. So each of these red areas are the areas that we fly on an annual basis. So in the fall, after leaves fall off, in the spring, before leaves come on. And it's a little bit different though than our elk survey. So when I had our elk, it's nice straight lines over the same area, apart. This is not a brain. This is actually an area that we're flying. So this is an example of one of those survey areas, and that's the flight of the plane. And so start here, and you go like this. This is why I don't do them. I would be puking. Ben does good though, right?
Oh yeah, I have fun.
Yeah, but it's slow, it's low, and we are flying up and down every one of those draws and getting a close look and trying to count every single one of those deer that we can. We fly in all those same areas every year. So what does it look like right now? This is a little bit, this line right here, this black line is our population trend. Looks like we're at 1990 here, all the way to this year, 2025. So we're a little over 6 deer per square mile right here. Here was our peak where we were almost at 11. That was around 2016. So we're definitely on a decline. And unfortunately, when the guys flew this last year, we're 14% down from last year. And it's a little bit surprising, but drought has a huge impact on mule deer. We found that it almost can be as devastating as hard winters. And in some of these we had a really bad spring storm a couple of years ago, a lot of snow that had an impact. And so it's just been cumulative of a lot of things. But that's where we're sitting right now. So with that, we're going to stay pretty conservative with our gun licenses for mule deer into next year. That's what I have for mule deer. Just real quick on the whitetails. We've talked about that a little bit. Our licenses were conservative, under 50,000. But we're gonna be less this next year. We've heard it loud and clear from all of our hunters in the surveys, especially in the east. The unfortunate thing in the east is it might be our new reality unless something dramatically changes with the habitat. The carrying capacity just isn't there anymore. We don't have the habitat. Deb and I flew to Wahpeton yesterday for a meeting, and as you leave Bismarck, there's quite a bit of grasslands and wetlands, and there's habitat. You can see a lot of places where deer could live. And then you get past the Cheyenne River and you look down and you're like, I don't know where a fawn could be raised hardly. There's just a few tree rows. Most everything's drained, everything's tilled. It's tough. You have those few river systems and that's it. So we're definitely seeing that impact. But with that said, we're going to stay conservative with our gun licenses. But something to keep in mind is that's one thing we can control, right? We can control that. We can change the allocation. Our muzzleloader license then is 2% of that allocation, so that's also controlled. But we do still have an unlimited archery license. On non-residents, it's unlimited for whitetail still. They can come and buy over the counter. Youth, it's getting to be a pretty decent amount of the harvest. Gratis, that's a guaranteed license. That's a significant part of our harvest. So as we look at those eastern units, we can drop the licenses, but we're not necessarily dropping the amount of harvest happening in those units by what we're dropping. But we're running out of room. There's nowhere, we can't go much lower. We're pretty much at the bottom on a lot of these units, and we just got to give that time. That's where we're at with the system right now. So any questions on the big game stuff? Moose are doing good too. So we did have an increase in our license allocation. They're doing good in the Northwest still. Around that Williston area and through those bottoms. We did have a lot of licenses and hit them, probably harvested maybe a little more than we wanted, along with some winter tick issues and some other things that were going on, but we were pretty conservative on license allocations, and they've responded, and population, our survey this year was up a little bit, and so we did increase allocation. Yep. Okay, all right, thank you.
Bruce, you want to give us a quick swap update?
Sure. Everybody's here to talk about non-game, rare and declining species, I know, but SWAP is State Wildlife Action Plan. So Congress, through the Fish and Wildlife Service, provides states with monies to address rare and declining species in the state, but we have to develop a plan. So the first plan was in 2005. We identified about 100 species at that point in time. We call them species of greatest conservation need. The rewrite in 2015, we went up to 115, and now we're rewriting that plan this year. And so far, we've identified 134 species. So we're seeing that increase in the number of species that are rare and declining, either regionally, throughout the different states or within the state. So we look at a lot of terrestrial invertebrates, aquatic invertebrates, grassland birds, just any of those species out there that there's enough information that we can determine that they are rare and declining. So part of the plan is there's 8 elements. We're looking at abundance of those, distribution, some of the threats that are affecting these species, and then some of the actions. And you guys have talked about anything that's good for deer and pheasants and ducks is good for a lot of these species too. A lot of grassland dependent critters are on that list. So we're going to have a draft plan by mid-May out on our website. So I just encourage you guys, part of those elements is public review and public comments. So it'll be on our webpage. So please take a look at it. It is a pretty lengthy document, but we would encourage any comments about that. Yes, sir.
I was here for the swap when we had the in-person for work. When it's done, are you gonna disseminate it out to anybody that attended, when we had the in-person session for it, or did it mainly just have to go out there and get it?
Yeah, we were going to develop an interactive PDF or something on the webpage that would be available, and you can break it down by all the different chapters and everything. But yeah, I encourage, especially if you attended that, we had a swap summit, we called it, where we invited public and organizations to come and help us develop that plan. That's what he's referring to. So it will be, the final plan will be out on our webpage for dissemination.
Thanks, Bruce. We'll move to an enforcement update. Mr. Irk.
All right. I guess it's been kind of a typical spring enforcement wise. Boat ramps have been busy, especially, days, any day the wind doesn't blow. You'll see Hazelton and the rifle range have been really busy this spring already. Boat ramps have probably been open a little more than 5 weeks, I suppose. Fishing seems good. Size structure, Paul, seems like pretty nice fish in the river right now.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah. Guys are catching smaller fish, but there seems to be a lot of 16 to 20 inch fish probably that are being caught and kept. And of course, the big ones are still in there. So fishing's been keeping us busy. Spring turkey season, turkey license numbers were up a little bit this year, and turkey numbers are up. So seems to be lots of people out taking advantage of that, seeing a lot of turkeys and turkey hunters getting harvested. So that's all good. With the wildlife division, some of the wardens, we worked through some of the management areas, removing tree stands and whatnot. Try and get ahead of that a little bit. It's something we try to work on, but seems like it a lot of times kind of falls to the bottom of the priority list. If we're doing that, we're not doing other things like working at the boat ramps for fishermen or turkey hunters and things like that. But what I would encourage you guys, though, if you are on game and fish management areas and you find a stand, the easiest thing to do is just, if you have like Onyx, drop a pin on there and text it to your local warden. We will try to go after those. That's the most efficient way for us. I've had people call me and try and give me general directions. Well, it's easy to find, and then you get out there. No, it's not. But if we have the GPS point, it saves us a lot of time to try and do those things. And we do try and keep on top of it, but I will tell you that it's almost impossible to get them all. You can put them up faster. And it seems like compliance is getting better with the equipment ID number. People are getting more and more used to that, I think. Seeing more stands with the numbers, and that keeps them in compliance. Other than that, just one more thing with the ANS stuff. We're still seeing a number of people that leave their house with the plug in the boat going to the boat ramp. And just a reminder, you cannot do that. The plug has to be out of the hull of your boat anytime you're transporting it. So everybody seems to realize that the live well's got to be drained and that they pull their plug when they leave the boat ramp, but it's got to be out when you're returning to the boat ramp as well. I hear a lot of guys say, well, I just put it in at home. No, that's not compliant. So we really want to stress that there are zebra mussels in the system, Hawaii now. So everything we can do to keep transporting any of that water further north is going to benefit us. Other than that, anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I got a question on those zebra mussels.
Yeah.
Have they been on an increase here, zebra mussels?
Well, South Golden Lake was detected last fall over in the eastern part of the state by Cooperstown. That was the last lake that was detected.
Can you plant, a red ear in any of these lakes? Will they survive?
That again, Scott, can you what?
Red ear?
Sunfish.
They look like a sunfish, but they're out in Arizona. They have a little red ear, okay? And they have a second set of teeth, and they call them shell crackers. Okay,
Well, as far as for control of zebra mussels?
Right.
Oh,
okay, well, they put them in, and the fisheries guys could check this out. They put them in Lake Havasu about, I don't want to give you the year because I don't know it. But originally, when I was originally started down there, you could pick up brush and fishing rods or whatever's in the lake and pick it up, and it was solid mussel, okay? Now in Lake Havasu with the red ear in there, you can't find a piece of branch or anything that has got mussels. Lake Havasu virtually is mussel free, and the red ear are the reason.
what does it do to the other fishery? What does it do to the other fish species?
I don't know, but the red ear now get to 5 pounds, 3 ounces as big as red ear.
Yeah.
And every year, the only thing I've ever caught is about a 3-pounder, but, and they're a bluegill, look like a bluegill, and they're about this. My question to fisheries, could they survive up here? Because if they can, they're a great fishery.
Yep, they can't handle our North Dakota winters. Our climate's too cold for them, unfortunately.
Well, how come that, we have bluegills down there too, and you have bluegills up here? It seems like they're the same species. Is there that much of a difference?
Yep. Yeah, they're in the same family. They're in this Antarctic family of fish.
Right.
They look superficially similar for sure, but they just can't handle their cold climate up here.
So they've already tried to have some up here?
The fisheries literature says they cannot survive here. They're not native to this area, and they simply cannot handle these cold temperatures up here.
They're a great fish. I didn't know, that was my question. I didn't know if they'd survive.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's interesting because so Ben Holen, obviously a lot of people in the room know Ben. He's our aquatic nuisance species coordinator, does a fantastic job. But I guess I wasn't aware that there was something that, because anytime there is zebra mussels, I mean, that's the whole reason behind trying as hard as we do to keep them out of lakes, because there hasn't been any positives as far as removing them of anything in the natural system to where that actually removes zebra mussels. And so that's, I guess that's something, because we actually had at our last awful meeting, Dwight, there was a really, some good coordination among states on aquatic nuisance species, and really interesting presentation from a lot of folks from Idaho about the mussels that were in the Snake River out there. And they did a really experimental project where they killed the river for several miles downstream. I mean, everything pretty, a pretty extreme approach, but it sounds like that was short-lived, I believe, as well.
I mean, the lake was back on zebra mussels, and it's not anymore.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, interesting thought. Yeah.
Actually, the fishery should, you already know they can't survive.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. That was my question.
Andrew.
There's another suggestion to that. If you do get an issue with them, crayfish eat zebra mussel too. And they're native. There's other ways you can look at it too, because you want to introduce a new species to North Dakota, obviously.
Yeah, and obviously we have crayfish already in some areas, so.
Right, there's other options to that too that you can look at.
Paul, fisheries update?
Sure. Yeah, I guess maybe I'll apologize a little bit for sounding like a broken record at these meetings, but fishing's fantastic. The rivers Corey mentioned, anglers are having great success out there. One of the neat things we're seeing from basically Garrison Dam to the South Dakota border on the Missouri River and Lake Oahe right now is since the 2011 flood, we were dealing with some pretty severe forage issues out there. And we were dealing, pardon me? So we were dealing with some pretty severe forage issues out there, and our walleye weren't growing very well. We had a lot of walleye kind of stockpiling in this 11 to maybe 13, 14 inch range, a lot smaller than anglers are really interested in. But like Corey mentioned, what he's seeing in what anglers are harvesting this year, what our sampling is telling us, my personal angling experience too, is that we're finally getting a number of those walleye into that more like 15, 18 inch range right now. So I think a lot of anglers are going to be happier with that. And we're seeing that trophy potential is still out there. We're conducting a tagging study right now collaboratively with South Dakota Game Fish and Parks to get a better handle on how anglers are utilizing walleye between Garrison and Oahe dams. So this week we've been doing a lot of electrofishing at night on the river, and wow, are there some nice fish out there. So some definite, 10+ pound walleye wherever we're shocking on the river, from Garrison Dam down to that McLean Bottoms area. So lots of nice fish out there. Our district lake fishing, our prairie lake fishing, fantastic. Honestly, we've never had better walleye opportunity out there than we do right now. A couple of challenges though that we're seeing. One might be, as the summer progresses, access might be getting pretty tricky on Lake Oahe. Right now we're at about 1598 or so elevation. Bad things start happening at our boat ramps at Cattail Beaver Langlers when we start dipping much below this. So that could be a bit of a challenge. We're working with the Corps of Engineers to at least maintain some boating access at the Jennerville or Rivery boat ramp, the one south of Beaver Bay. And then north of Beaver Bay is the Olhauser boat ramp, just a few miles north of Beaver Bay. Fingers crossed we're going to be able to get that one operational here, working with the Corps of Engineers on that here in the next few weeks. The other thing, I guess we talked a little bit about our ANS issues.
Can I ask one question quick?
Sure.
What happened to the fish after you electrocute them?
So we're basically, the electrofishing, we're taking control of the fish's swimming. And they're drawn towards the positive probes on the front of the boat.
Okay.
And so in the boat, there's a generator generating that electricity. There's some droppers on the front of the boat. Have you ever seen a picture of one of our electrofishing boats? Yep.
But I've never asked what happens to the fish after.
Yeah. So we're basically taking control of their swimming. So a fish's swimming ability is controlled by electrical impulses, just like your muscle movements. We're taking control of that with our electrofishing boat, drawing those fish towards the positive probes on the front of the boat. And as they get closer and closer, that electrical gradient becomes stronger and stronger, and eventually just completely incapacitates the fish. So we can dip them up, throw them in a live well in the boat, and then just a few seconds, they're snap right out of it.
Wow.
And then we can release them if we're doing it right, unharmed. So, yeah.
Yep. What about the smelt population in the river?
Well, so what we have, basically, we have some smelt in the Garrison Dam tail race that are entrained through Lake Sakakawea. But smelt are a cold water fish. We don't see them living or surviving year round in the North Dakota portion of Lake Oahe or much of the river above it. So, but in South Dakota, that's a major player as far as forage is concerned, right. Where they have that cold water habitat year round. They're rebounding a little bit in following the 2011 flood. Smelt have recovered a bit down there, but another component to that cold water forage base are Cisco, and Cisco tend to get a little larger than smelt, and that's really what helps fuel some of these larger walleye.
Is that what we're seeing? Is the Cisco coming up the river now?
There's a few, we see them pretty consistently up into almost that Hazelton area, Cisco. Right. But then as summer progresses and, those water temps get too warm in Hazelton, basically the cold water habitat doesn't exist year round above about Mobridge on Lake Oahe.
Years ago, back in the 70s, we had so many smelt in the river, we'd go net them. Why was it different back then?
So how smelt got established in Lake Oahe was the first smelt introduced in the whole Missouri River system were stocked into Lake Sakakawea in, I want to say about 71.
Okay.
And they quickly entrained through Garrison Dam and then started reproducing, throughout the Missouri River system, from Oahe Dam all the way up to Garrison Dam. But they imprint they imprint much like a salmon does, where they reproduce, where they were hatched, and try and reproduce in the same area. But a few of them do venture off into other places to try and reproduce. So what we saw when we went through that severe drought from say 88 to 92, and basically Lake Oahe didn't exist in North Dakota, those smelt had nowhere to reproduce in North Dakota anymore. So they kept reproducing where they imprinted on areas lower in Lake Oahe. So since then, we just haven't seen those good smelt runs. The last good smelt run we saw into North Dakota from Lake Oahe was in 1996. So it's been a while.
So up in Sakakawea, on our graphs, I mean, it's just solid smelt in various places.
Yep.
Oh, so we got a good population. up
Right,
there.
smelt numbers are doing well in Lake Sakakawea
Sure
right now
seems
as well.
like it.
Yep,
Yeah, okay.
yep.
Then it's because of the deep cold water?
Right, smelt are cold water forage fish, the opposite of your red ear sunfish. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's that, like I said, access could be a little bit challenging on Lake Oahe. One of the other challenges we're facing is certainly with our aquatic nuisance species. We've been pretty fortunate that we've, other than South Golden Lake, we've kept zebra mussels at bay pretty well, but where we've seen zebra mussels appearing pretty consistently has been on our cabin lakes, and so most likely a vector for getting these zebra mussels into our state is people purchasing a dock or boat lift or something like that from, say, a big place in Minnesota that has zebra mussels in it. So one of the things we've changed now is anytime you move that infrastructure from one body of water to another or buy a dock or lift, there's a 21-day drying period, which should take care of those zebra mussels. So we're doing a lot of outreach right now with these lake and cabin associations, trying to get that word out, and I think we're having some success there. So, any other questions on fisheries? Yep.
Paul, you been finding any more big head or silver carp anywhere in any other waters?
No, that's the good news. Just no new locations where we've documented them in recent years. Yep.
Were they in the Jamestown area? Is that
Yep. Yep. The James River.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. And back.
There was about a 30-pound grassy that was shot last year, grass carp in the James, so.
Okay.
So there was a pretty big one that got shot, so.
Yeah.
And I think I had him to hold you guys about that too. So.
Okay. Yep.
Are you noticing out at Fish Creek, expanding bluegill population to the point of where they're stunting growth of the other fish?
There certainly seem to be impacting the growth of themselves. Maybe not so much the other fish species. Like if you're a largemouth bass, this is the greatest thing happened to you right now. That all these little bluegill in there. But yeah, and that was the result of most likely an illegal introduction. We didn't put the bluegill in there.
Oh. How often do you restock Horsehead Lake?
We've been stocking it, I think, annually since the first walleye we stocked in there was 2017.
What did you put? 2 million?
All we can get. It's such a big body of water.
How many did you put in there?
It's varied so much over the year because our smaller bodies of water, we can request say 40,000 walleye, and we know we're going to have that hatchery production to get it. Horsehead Lake has been where so much of our surplus has gone over the last few years. So raising fish at our hatcheries is a lot like farming. We don't know exactly what we're going to get come harvest time a lot of years. So, but when we go to drain our hatchery ponds, a lot of times our production is a little bit better than we anticipated. And I've tried to take advantage of all those fish for Horsehead Lake as we can. Horsehead's, I believe the third largest natural lake in North Dakota. It's something like 16 square miles. Devil's Lake, then Stump, then Horsehead. So enormous body of water. Yeah.
So what about the ramp there? You guys pay for the ramps or?
We're actually leasing that ramp. We have an access agreement with the state land board, so that where the boat ramp is on Horsehead Lake is Department of Trust lands or school lands. Okay. Everyone knows them as. So we're leasing that. I think about was it 4 acres now? We just expanded the parking lot this spring.
Yes.
Yeah. So and that's a lease agreement we have with the state land board, a 25-year lease. So.
But that you can only put one boat in at a time.
I know. It turns out we should have probably done a 2 or 3 laner there for the traffic we got right away.
If husbands would teach their wives how to drive pickup.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a lot of those situations that end up in marriage counseling, just so you know, right?
Exactly. Any new boat ramps this year?
Yeah, around not in the south central part of the state, but certainly around the state. Or I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I know we've got a list out there that I think Bob Freilich just did a webcast, I believe, on that, where he probably mentioned that's for sure that's still up on our website, that he gives a rundown on some of our bigger projects. Yeah.
How about the fish population on Sakakawea? Heard much about that. I would suspect it's still really good.
Yeah, it's the walleye population there is still really good. last year, it seemed like maybe fishing was a little bit off on Lake Sakakawea, but our netting survey says, I mean, it's a fantastic fish population out there. Yeah, so, yeah, hopefully they cooperate a little bit better this year.
Why are salmon smaller than Fort Peck's?
Cisco. So our Lake Sakakawea salmon are growing up, basically our cold water forage in Lake Sakakawea are rainbow smelled, which if you're a smaller salmon, they're great forage for you. But if you're a larger salmon, you've got to do so much swimming to eat these tiny little morsels compared to your body size. Whereas if you're a big salmon in Fort Peck, a big Cisco is perfect forage for you. So
They got a lot more out there?
Yep, there are no rainbow smelt in Fort Peck. That's completely Cisco or their cold water forage in Fort Peck.
Did that occur naturally?
No, those were introduced into Fort Peck. And that's the reason we have Cisco in Lake Sakakawea and Lake Oahe was those Cisco were entrained through Fort Peck Dam and then through Garrison Dam. Yep.
Well, we're past 9 o'clock and I know we could sit and listen to Paul. He's a wealth of information. Every time he talks, I learn something and it is very interesting, very knowledgeable. Yeah, we need to give him from 7 to 9 o'clock.
Room till midnight, right?
Last thing we have is we do have some door prizes. So Jody, I need 3 numbers between 1 and 26.
Start out with 4.
Todd Humphrey, number 4. You get to pick of the litter here.
Come to you. Got a mug, a blanket, and a bag. All right.
13 is 21.
13, Dwight.
The mug.
21, Phil Mastrangelo.
I guess I'll take a blanket
Yeah.
for sure.
Thanks again, North Dakota Bowhunter Association. Appreciate the cookies, coffee, and sponsoring. Jody, thanks for everything. As Jody mentioned, if there are any clubs or anybody interested in outside of Bismarck for next fall, next spring advisory board meeting, it'd be a great option to look at other places outside of Bismarck as well too. But thanks for everybody's discussion, input. Great meeting. Appreciate everybody taking the time out of your night to be here, and just have a great spring and great summer.